if you're so good at this, if you can please extemporaneously talk a little bit about the kind of data that you collect, and you'll be talking about traffic later, but just a little bit about that, because you really do round out this discussion. We've got weather, we've got financial impact, we've got measuring data, and it's really nice to hear like the kinds of things that you do.
Great. Well, I'm a cartographer, so that's the skill I bring to the table here. I had a long career at a GIS company, which is GIS. You can think of it as smart mapping, or mapping with a database behind it. And so I've been an eclipse chaser since 1991. But in the year 2009, I was going to see a total solar eclipse at sea, and the existing maps at that time didn't have information about latitude and longitude on them, and the ship was guaranteed or advertised to go to the point of grace eclipse. I wanted to keep the ship captain honest. So I decided as a GIS professional, I would start making my own eclipse maps. I brought it on the ship. It turned out to be very popular, and people encouraged me to continue making eclipse maps from that point on. So, so I've been making many eclipse maps, and my website is greatamericaneclipse.com.
So one of the things that I was hoping, and that is emerging from our data discussion, it's a question. So in my real life, I publish kidsoutandAbout.com. This is just my surreal life. And so we measure everything. And I'm also married to an industrial mathematician. We are data people. And seeing trends visually is something that just sort of my whole family does in our nerdy way. So discussing at this point, 10 months out for the 2024 eclipse, what there is to be measured is really key, right? Carrie gave you some, beginnings of how to measure web data that will, give us answers about as things ramp up. All right, well, what does that trajectory look like of how many people are accessing your site? How are they engaging on social media? Like those numbers. And what I just sort of like to challenge each of you for this discussion and also for the future. What is it that you are measuring or have measured that is going to be a critical component of the story that you tell later on as you're using this to launch your communities or your academic communities or your local communities, sort of launch them into the future. And so it was lovely to see the infographic from Nashville that Janet shared in her YouTube is one of like the most popular infographics, because you look at that and you can see impact in those numbers, and she breaks out the types. So that's like that. I really like to see you all be thinking about that, like so the types of things that you can measure. Can we just ask Jay to do just a little bit more, just for a few minutes, about how you get all that data to make those weather maps and such? What is measuring?
There are and have been since the late 70s a suite of what we call polar orbiting satellites that have been flying over both poles of the Earth, looking downward. First with the NOAA series, and then now there are European satellites, there are Russian satellites, no Chinese polar orbiters that at least looking at weather. When a satellite goes over top of the Earth, it's not seeing cloud and it's not seeing ground. It's seeing radiance measurement. It's got so much energy in red wavelengths. It's got this much energy in any one of a dozen infrared wavelengths. And an algorithm looks at those, and they're measuring at about a 1 kilometer size pixel. It looks at it and it says, okay, it's got this much infrared here, this much visible. That is a cloudy pixel. You and I would look at it and say, that's obviously cloud. You can see it moving, you can see it's got the shape of clouds and that sort of thing. Looks at all these pixels across the Earth, and there are millions and hundreds of millions of them. And I classify them in one of 4 categories. Cloudy, probably cloudy, clear, probably clear. And so the maps I make up, they then aggregate those 1 kilometer pixels into anything 10 kilometers across, which could be 100 of them, or the ones I use about 25 kilometers across. So 625 of these measurements aggregated, and those are the ones that produce. So now, it doesn't guarantee success, and you rely on the algorithm. That algorithm would have been from first principles, and then it would have been tweaked by watching the weather as the satellites flew over in the early days and saying, well, I gotta boost this up a little bit to make it look right. But of course, that makes it look wrong in some other place. So if I use the NOAA satellites operated by the US, I can get morning and I can get afternoon. So there's 10:30 in the morning pass and 1:30 in the afternoon pass. The European data set, if I use it, takes all of the satellites and just averages it for the day. And right now, that's the one I prefer. It has a 25 kilometer resolution. But I prefer it because to me, it gives more realistic cloud amounts when I actually go to the satellite pictures and look. But even so, I think that the maps I produce record too much cloud when it gets to be very high level. Anyway, I take all of these little pixels. I take 20 years of them. I get them average per month. I take 20 years of them on average a month. So when you really think of it, there's 30 days times 20 years times the times the measurements. So each one of those values is 600 measurements. I was asked, and I'm going to go back, I can also get transparency data, not whether there's a cloudy pixel identified, but what's the actual transparency. Like today would not have a major impact on the solar eclipse enjoyment for people who haven't seen one before. For the super photographers, it would be a problem. But today would not be a bad day to see that eclipse. Everybody would go away happy. But if I can give you a data set that says that your frequency of opaque cloud is much lower than someone else, the already favorable climatology here might even be better. So I think I'll go back and work on that. So if the eclipse is early in the morning, I usually will use NASA data. And if it's in this eclipse where it starts in the morning in Mexico and goes into the late afternoon, I'll use the all-day data from the satellite. And then like Michael, I use a GIS program, put it all together and overlay the eclipse tracks and everything else. I use a competitor.
Yeah. And I'm gonna ask each of you guys, remember, you're all thinking about how you're measuring things and what you might be thinking measuring. Those of you who are in 2017, think about what you did measure that may not have been talked about here. For each of the two of you, could you just, so you are Sarah in Vincennes, Indiana, who's in the other room right now, but you are, how does Sarah use each, this is a terrible feedback sound, use each of your websites to help their community? Maybe it's that I'm close.
That speaker there, I was wondering if that might be the feedback.
Those are the microphones you need.
Are those microphones?
It's all coming out of that speaker, coming out of the speakers in the room.
Okay.
But let me, yeah.
Right overhead.
Yeah.
Does the microphone here pick up for Zoom?
Yeah, it should do.
Can we just turn off the microphone here then?
Yep. So we were concerned that people wouldn't get here, but I think you're all loud enough. Until we switch off.
Hey, sorry, I'm going to request that you guys not do that because the audio is really garbled with the room microphone compared to the one you're holding up to your face.
Right, that was one of the reasons that we chose to use that. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I don't think they can hear
Yeah.
me from you.
If someone said, "Can you hear me okay?" it sounded like a lot of room echo.
Okay,
Yep, so we'll use this and we'll deal with the feedback. There are way worse problems. So the two of you, you're Sarah. You're Sarah.
Oh, okay.
And you're going to eclipseofile.com. How do you use it to help use yourself and your community in Vincennes, Indiana?
I'm gonna move a little out in the room and hope it helps.
Oh, I think it did.
When you go to my website, you get climatological data. Which is fine if you were taking a tour of 300 people and you have to go to one place and you're not gonna be mobile, or if you're setting up an event in a stadium, you can sort of look at your probabilities. If you're mobile, it's a different thing because you can say, well, Texas looks good, I'm gonna go to Texas. But you won't know what the weather is actually like. So when we get close to an eclipse, I move away from climatological data to real data to two things, numerical weather forecasts and to the satellite imagery. And they have, the numerical weather forecasts go 15 days out and they just aren't worth looking. They're really just a sign of anxiety. I started watching the forecast 15 days out, but 4 days out, you start to look for certain signs. There are many, many computer models, probably 6 or 8 of them. And if you look at all of them, you get confused. So you pick 2 or 3. In America here, the GFS model and the NAM. I won't tell you what the acronyms are, but and there's also Canadian models with various European models. Pick 2 or 3 of them, go to the sites, and I give them on my webpage. Cut them and see what they show. When those models start to show you the forecast for today that was the same as the forecast yesterday, then you start to believe them. If 2 models, one produced in Europe and one produced in North America or Canada and the US, show the same pattern, you can start to believe them. That usually takes place about 4 days out. Complex situations, 3 days out. But nevertheless, you've got 3 to 4 days warning on the actual weather expectation. From there, you can refine your position if you're mobile. Any of the members of the solar eclipse community belongs to the solar eclipse message list, SEML. Say that they've made multiple bookings along the eclipse track, 3 or 4 or 5 motels or hotels, and they will cancel 4 of them in the few days before the eclipse and go to the one where the weather forecast go the best possible. So if you happen to be in a place or are not mobile, then you sort of run into your plan B. If you've got a stadium full of people, you bring in a feed from one of the media, CNN or ABC, NBC. Because there's magic in that darkness that comes over. So you can get several days of planning, especially if it's a big weather system. You remember the chart I showed you, the massive area of cloud across the north. So you invoke your plan B at that point. And you still encourage people to come and see this because it's a magnificent experience. And I've had cases where in the middle of a rain, the skies have opened up. I've seen an eclipse and closed up and started raining all over again. I mean, hope springs eternal. That's what keeps the human race going, I guess. So you use the information that you can. Long range planning from my climate data, short range planning from the media. And I'm sure that Weather Channel and everybody else that does a weather broadcast is going to have to tell you the difference between listening to, say, the Weather Network and going to the actual site of the models where there are multiple ones is you don't get a feeling for how certain they are because they never tell you really, we're not sure whether it's going to be cloudy in here. It looks like it. No, they say it will be cloudy here. And the models will tell you that that cloud may be a little bit of a maybe thing. So that's the only reason I like to go to the original source. Lots of data out there. I try to point to it when we get close to the website. Usually put in a subdirectory called Weather Desk. You just punch it to the places where you can get that information. The only advice I can give you, go find a storm chaser who really know how to use weather data, and they'll probably help you pick your spot and give you someone who open them out. Lots of storm chasers in this country.
And the storm chasers, I would add, Jay, have exactly the opposite intent that as eclipse chasers have. And one other thing that's interesting about the track of the 2024 eclipse is that if you look at Tornado Alley and the peak time for tornadoes along Tornado Alley, it neatly overlays the path of the eclipse. So we have to be aware of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a tornado frequency, or not a frequency map. There's a map of tornadoes in April on my website. So Texas is no stranger to tornadoes, but they can go almost all the way to the Great Lakes.
Okay, well, if somebody goes to my website, okay. Well, first is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start with a very general observation, and that is that I've done a fair amount of research into old historic eclipses. I've spent time in libraries poring over old magazines, and one pattern was pretty clear, and that is that if a publication appeared before the eclipse, the dominant graphic featured with it was a map, an eclipse map. And then after the eclipse, there were no more eclipse maps in the publications, but there were drawings or photographs of the eclipse. So maps tell stories, and there are different types of stories to tell about an eclipse. And that's what I focus on. In fact, I also like to think of an eclipse map as a very special type of map because it's a map that you go to great effort to produce, but it's only valid for a few minutes and then its utility is expired. So why do we go to all that effort to make such an ephemeral map whose authority is very short duration? And the reason why we go to that trouble is because an eclipse map is also a treasure map. And a treasure is the most beautiful sight you will ever see in the sky. So that's the fundamental story that an eclipse map tells, is it guides you to that treasure. I made many different types of maps, some of which I'm gonna share tomorrow. And for example, one of the most popular maps that I've made are what I call drive shed maps. And they show, you've seen watershed maps that show how small streams collect into small rivers, which collect into large rivers and deposit into the ocean. Same idea with the drive shed maps. It's taking every point across the country and figuring out where the shortest drive path to the treasure, the tallest solar eclipse is. And then these maps, we can apply analytic methods using the technology that I work in called GIS, or Geographic Information Systems. And from that, we can produce information that is very important and desirable, especially to community organizers. And that is, how many people might come visit my community on Eclipse Day? And also, where are the real traffic problems going to be? So, that's a class of maps that I've made, and those are very popular maps. You'll find them on the website. I've also made other maps that tell us a different story about the eclipse. For example, interesting places to visit. I'm going to show maps tomorrow of that. I just heard a brilliant phrase in the breakout. We eclipse and me eclipse. The difference between a we eclipse is some people like to be in a stadium with thousands of other people and cheer the eclipse. And a me eclipse is somebody who likes to be on top of a mountain by themselves and in solitude and enjoying the experience that way. So I made maps for both me eclipses and we eclipses, and you'll see some of those tomorrow. And there's so many flavors of things that you can see in helping you determine. But basically, what I'm trying to do with my maps is tell you interesting stories about the places that you may want to visit for the eclipse, why you may want to choose one place or another, a me eclipse versus a we eclipse. And also just some interesting background about different places for the eclipses.
Okay. Lori, who's our transportation person here, you want to say it into the microphone here? Pass it on.
Is the feedback behaving
It's
better?
much, much better.
So I think I managed to turn the microphone down just a tiny bit.
Okay.
So can people online still hear?
Ask you still hear us? Ask people online if they can still hear. People online, can you still hear us, Lori?
Yes, we can still hear.
Awesome.
Thanks for confirming. I'm Lori Moore, the Genesee Transportation Council in Rochester, New York. And Michael, we love your maps. They really help tell the story, not only what you described, but also when we're trying to explain the situation to our stakeholders and our partners. And they're like, what? Really? There are people that study this and do this. So it's really been helpful with that. My question about data, have you done any, some of the questions that get from our traffic folks? Oh, well, that's possible. They like the real data. Have you had a chance or an experience working with actual travel conditions, like from INREX or any of those other travel companies? Because I want to make a call into them one of these days too, but I thought maybe we've already explored some of that, if that makes sense. So looking at actual traffic conditions from previous.
Well, I know that on Eclipse Day, online mapping services such as Google Maps or Apple Maps, will do a decent job of showing you where the heavy traffic is. But then to quantify the traffic impact of the eclipse generally, what we saw from 2017 is roughly half the states in the path of the 2017 eclipse. The state departments of transportation, half of them roughly set up, cameras or whatever at the highways to count the traffic that goes by, some strategic locations. And what they do is they take the observed traffic on the day of the eclipse or the day before and the day after, and then they subtract out the normal traffic volume for the same days of the weeks. And from that is how we generally get our best estimate of the eclipse impact or how many people came to visit the eclipse. So to my knowledge, that's the best information that we have.
Where do people find that data?
Typically, what I've seen, and you can do some Google research on this, but what I've seen, and I'll be showing this in a slide, is that there are, the local Department of Transportation or Tourism Board will publish these numbers after the eclipse. So that's generally how you find out.
Yeah, I know our DOT does, traffic counts but it's all kind of estimates, and it doesn't really help me tell the story to them of what's going to happen, other than looking at other states. So I will continue to do that.
Well, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, for example.
They don't like the anecdote.
For example, I was an anecdote. I was a data point because in 2017, my family and I were in Casper, Wyoming, and Wyoming probably had the highest rate of visitation beyond compared to the population. South Carolina had the most visitors, but Wyoming, when you compare it to the native population there, by one estimate that I read, the population of Wyoming tripled on Eclipse Day.
I read that.
But Wyoming has 500,000 residents. And by one estimate, 1 million people came to Wyoming to see the eclipse. And the reason I'm a data point is because we left too early after totality and we got stuck in a horrendous 12-hour traffic jam going back towards Colorado. Never again will we repeat that mistake. So the message to get through is arrive early, stay late, stay overnight at the eclipse. Generally, the traffic is not so bad before eclipse time. It's bad after eclipse time because that's a moment when everyone gets into their vehicle simultaneously and instantly jams up the roads.
Let me just ask Michael, so do you think that the reports from 2017 of all of the traffic are gonna help psychologically people to stay one more night this time? Like, I mean, we've been talking about that, right? Fortunately, the NCAA is that night, the championship is that night. So that may help people stay. But so, I mean, we have all those imagery, right? We have all the traffic jam. Do you think that that message has gotten out? And do you think, like, coupled with the data from there, that could help even more?
I think it's partially gotten out, but that's the job of this group, is to help get that message out and to bring back the data from 2017 and really hammer home the message. Stay overnight, wherever you are, just stay put. If you're camping or if you're staying at someone's house or a hotel or whatever, just stay an extra night and you'll be much better off.
I'm just gonna say, in New York, we are saying take Tuesday too. That's our hashtag, take Tuesday too.
One of the things to think about is the X-mode experience and Kate would be better answering the question. I'll ask the question, how much of the advertising and commentary beforehand
Louder,
about how different?
let me turn it back over there.
I'm not getting to read it. How much of the commentary beforehand there? Now, the Eastern United States is much better serviced with interstate than the West is. So there are many more avenues for people to get home. So you want to be careful on the message ahead of time that it isn't counterproductive. The whole message at X-Mode was if you hadn't booked a year ahead of time, you just weren't going to get in there. And people didn't go. So just be a little careful in the messaging. But I think maybe we should put that page on the thing.
So I'm gonna ask Carrie, who gave us that incredibly information-packed talk on marketing and getting your website set up for metrics and thinking in terms of metrics. I made her cut so that it would fit the time. So I'm just gonna ask her to just do a little bit of a extra what other things she could talk about. And then if we can move to a small marketing discussion, that would be great. And that's gonna lead into a question that was asked in the chat about people looking at hotel data earlier on and like what's the state of hotels right now? So here's Carrie.
Hi, everybody. So data and online is like a rabbit hole. You can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'm just gonna throw out a couple of things that I'm hoping that it resonates with you, what I had to take out. But so one of the things that you may consider is a CRM, which is a customer relationship management tool. And there's things like HubSpot is a great one. Constant Contact has one. Both of those, if you're a 501c, do give fairly great discounts. If you become a member of them, if you pay it front, I believe one of them, Constant Contact gives 40% off. And they offer a great mail solution, a great social media solution, as well as CRM. So you can follow your customers from beginning to end and know how they're interacting with both the website and all your other marketing things. So definitely worth looking into. Also, if you're a 501c, looking in for Google for Nonprofit, also a great thing that they offer, all the G Suite features for free, unlimited emails and such. So that's one thing I would do. The other thing that I would highly suggest is forms. So if you have a form on your website, just very simple, but if you have a form on your website, have it go to a landing page instead of just having it come up and say, hey, thank you for submitting your form. Because if you have somebody submit your form, but you never have them go to your landing page, you know your form is not working. It's a great, easy way to track it. And it's also that you can custom build their experience through your website. If you send them to a thank you page for filling out your form, you can say, you may also be interested in X, Y, and Z and take it from there. The other thing to consider for data is when you're at events, use QR codes. It's a great way that you can direct them directly to an email sign up or a web page where you have an event posted, those types of things. And you can also track all of that. The other one I wanted to point out is Google Analytics is not just for your website. It's also for if you want to hook it up with Constant Contact or MailChimp. You can also know if they're coming from your socials. So don't just put that code in one place. Make sure it's stretched out to anything that you're using for online marketing. You're putting it within that if it accepts it. I don't remember what else I cut out, but is there any questions? Does anybody have any questions about anything?
I actually have a question that I just want you to expound on for a second.
Okay.
So, the question is, what can regular people do? And what do they need to hire somebody to do? Can you help push those into two different categories?
It's such a hard question though, because regular people could be very familiar with websites, feel very comfortable, and they sit down and it just makes perfect sense. And then other people sit down and it all wah, 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 and they want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But do be smart about it. That's where that goals come in the beginning, where you set tangible goals that are measurable and that you know your team can handle. If your team can't handle it, don't even try. But I will say, if you haven't set any of it up yet, make sure your team owns it. Don't hire a marketing company that sets it all up for you and you actually don't own it, because they will go do it themselves. And then you have, if you ever want, you have to wrangle it away from them. So make sure whatever marketing company that you hire actually works with you to set it up so it all goes and is connected to one email address that your company owns. Regular things, blogging. I think that you should always do your own blogging because you're the most knowledgeable. Or hire somebody you know that's an influencer, or have pull from others that you know are knowledgeable and give them credit, of course. But I would never hire a marketing company to do all your social media unless that's what they're great at and they're going to do all of that for you. Google Analytics. Once they set it up for you, if a marketing company sets it up for you, they can send you regular PDFs. Make sure they do that. Make sure that they're just sending you a downloaded snapshot. So you're getting every Monday morning. You're seeing what is you need to see, what you need to know, where things are coming from, if your website's getting a lot more traffic, and communicate that to your hosting company. Communicate it to your website company, because if your website all of a sudden is going up in traffic, you want to make sure that it can handle that.
I think that's a huge point.
Yeah.
Like, just underline that for a second, right?
Because I mean, I know I work with somebody who just does hosting, and he works with the Rochester Museum and Science Center. And that's one thing we've made clear is when this day happens, know that you're going to give our bandwidth much higher. And these are the events that are going to lead up to it. So it has to be a constant communication, because if he has a firewall set up so malware and all that doesn't hit the website, and all of a sudden it shoots up, great, they're going to think, oh, it's getting a hacking right now, and the website's just going to go dark. So you need to be prepared for that. You need to have communication. It's not just build it and let it go. That's one of the worst things people can do is, oh, I built a website, no, I'm not gonna touch it for a year. It doesn't work out that way.
Any questions from the,
Not really a question, Deb, but you kind of pointed at me, so.
yeah. Microphone to Mark Howell.
Before we diverge from the data discussion to the marketing discussion. So Mark Howell, Grounded Foods LLC, I'll be presenting next little bit here. So back in 2017, on the Malheur National Forest, Eastern Oregon, I was a senior supervisor fire prevention officer in this long time. And so we originally got this kind of tickle of information that this was coming from our Chamber of Commerce, right? And so we had a really great lead front desk visitor information guy, and he hooked our website, the Malheur National Forest website, up to Google Analytics. And we started watching those analytics right up. Right as you know, as we're getting closer and closer to Eclipse, and people are looking specifically at designated camping, dispersed camping, you know, information related to the forest. So that right there was one of our key data points. And honestly, I did a lot of what Michael did, but by hand. I didn't have, at the time I was an office in GIS, I had no idea. Digital elevation models, LiDAR, you know, traffic flow mapping, had no idea. So I went out and did it by hand. Actually just went out and started driving the forest, looking at, okay, what are people going to look at? Because not everyone's technologically savvy, right? But you can use your eyeballs and you can use your brain. And you can use the paper map. You can start marking, highlighter, you know, it's, so Wildland Fire Service, you know, it's more of the markerometer, right? So I can start marking on this paper map. Well, let's see, here's a big open spot, high up elevation with easy road access. You think people are going to be in there? Oh yeah, and they were. Oh yeah. So just using that simple basic model, just paper maps, there you go. You don't have to get super fancy. And you can kind of start getting your own situational awareness going. So that's all I have.
I say Mark, you made a good point, just that the Chamber of Commerce should be communicating with the traffic and such. So don't think of it as you're collecting that data just for internal, you're collecting it for everybody.
Oh, really good point. Okay, let's address, there was that's one more question here and then we'll, or comment, and then we're gonna look at. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, I'm Erica with the Texas Hill Country River Region. We're based out of Uvalde, Texas. We are going to be in the half of both October and April. So we're wondering if there's any data that has shown kind of where we think the majority of the people are going to be going for October and April. Like, is there any of that information out there?
Michael has some answer, or that'd be great. That's a question.
Yeah, I've got some data on that. And I so far I've accumulated that data by broad regions or by states, but I will break it down at a more granular level. But you know, the drive shed maps that I made to predict the eclipse visitation makes two assumptions. First assumption is that people outside the path will generally drive the shortest path of the shortest drive to the eclipse center line. So that's one way you can predict the visitation. And the second assumption is that the closer you are, the more likely you are to make the drive. Yeah, a few people will drive all the way across country, but it's the people in the neighboring state or the nearby metropolitan areas. That's where you're going to get most of your visitation. And later, I'll be showing some slides with this information. These maps are already on our website. We have individual pages for the different states, including Texas. And later on, I'll be breaking it down into a more granular fashion so you can see for your county what you might expect in terms of eclipse visitation. Okay.
This is only a small point, but in my blurb for Sky and Telescope and on the webpage, I've identified jumps in Texas and So watch the eclipse.
So what?
You go a little bit to the southwest along the eclipse drive, southeast drive, also that whole area is pretty good, so. In the past, that's had influences on where people go. I don't know whether it will. If you're close in the area, you can certainly build on that.
Look at some of the questions that were in the chat. Oh, Polly, you had something?
Wanted to make a quick comment that it's really my experience from running the website with Michael is that it's a combination of both what both of these two were saying. It's about road networks and movability and potential cloud cover. So so if you think about Michael's got these great maps that show like within a 200-mile radius of the path, people are going to choose the shortest distance by the easiest highway that's going to lead to a spot with the least likelihood of clouds, greatest likelihood of clear skies. And our website and Michael's book, the field guide, talks about even just within Texas, to speak to your question, about where the likelihood of the clouds are, and we get a lot of information from the website. But it's that combination of stuff. So when you look at the maps and you look at the drive shed, it's a combination of those things, and you can pretty much tell. And Michael's predictions from 2017, in most cases, on the tourism numbers, the traffic projections were pretty accurate, with maybe one exception, but most of them were very accurate. So you can take what he's got on there and have a pretty good probability on it. So it's all of those things.
Okay, and just for the folks on Zoom, what Polly was saying was that it's really a combination of the weather maps and the drive shed maps where people are looking to optimize between the two of them. We have to start wrapping it up, but Michael, you rip on that.
I'll add one more point to that, and that is that there are going to be certain places that are going to be magnets for visitation. For example, I remember in 2017 in Southern Illinois, there was known as the Osborne concert. Where he did, I forget the meme that he did, but it was kind of compelling. So, there are going to be places that not only are people going to avoid certain places, perhaps because of the weather, but people are intentionally going to go someplace because there's an interesting and dramatic event, or there might be an incredibly scenic location that many people may choose to congregate to view the eclipse. So there's lots of factors involved, which is why in my visitation predictions, I give a pretty comfortable upper and lower bounds, because those factors, many of those factors are intangible. So I'm just trying to be within a certain range.
We had a couple questions on the chat, so I just want to wrap this up real quick. One of the questions is, we have Spencer actually asked two really compelling ones about how much people know vis-a-vis hotel room rates. And I think there's no easy answer to this, but I think actually Kate's information from Exmouth is really interesting. But so he says in 2015 was able to book hotel rooms, but in 2022, nobody would book them for 2024. And I do think that that's because people saw what the results were from 2017 and realized, wow, we are not going to know how to price it, what those numbers are going to be like until we get closer. And I think that we definitely are. That's being reflected in hotel room booking now. And the second question that was asked was they're looking to bring in a community of 100,000. Here, can you actually scroll down to the bottom part of the chat? So it's a really good question. There. So they're on the center line and they have 100,000 visitors typically during April. How do they convince the higher ups that they think that there's going to be 300,000? Definitely the data, the impact data for the 2017 Eclipse page on the eclipse.aas.org resources. Go there and look at places like South Carolina and Kentucky and such. You'll find that data that's going to help you convince those others.